Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's session. I'm Cynthia Garrett, and if you were here last week, then you were part of a really good discussion on bitterness and offense and how to overcome it and a whole lot of other things. We've been hanging out with Tracey Bickle, who's on the senior leadership team at the International House of Prayer in Kansas City. She's also the Director of Restoration and Recovery in the Pastoral Support Department for nearly 20 years. I mean, Tracey's written a book called Chaos Beneath the Shade, and that's been the subject of what we've been discussing here the last couple of weeks. So I want you to grab a pen, piece of paper, take notes. She is the consummate teacher, and this book will rock your world because I know that we have all dealt with things that cause us to feel betrayed and forgotten and bitter and horrible. Welcome back, girl.
Glad to be here.
Good. So last week you were taking us really step by step through the book, and we kind of, just to sort of catch everybody out there who's watching, we went through the fact that bitterness is like sin crouching at the door. We went through the heartache of unmet expectations. We dealt with, the unseen root systems, there are 3 of them. Name them again, Tracey.
They were not receiving the honor you deserve, the monies you deserve, or the positions you deserve.
Yeah, okay. So for everybody watching, tell me that you haven't experienced one of those. You wouldn't be telling the truth. Okay,
Right.
Right, exactly. So we walked through all of this, dealing with disappointment, the way of the heart, ruling your emotions, not being led by your emotions. And we came to the place where we stopped last week, Tracey, and I want to pick up here because I think this is a cornerstone for us as Christians, but it's actually a cornerstone for anybody. Forgiveness. Does it really break the cycle?
I think it breaks the cycle. I think it breaks the cycle if we actually do it well. Like when we think of the verse, sin is crouching at the door, what we're looking at is a counseling session that God had with Cain. Like most people don't even think of it as a counseling session, right? Christians don't need counseling. Like we avoid counseling at all costs. I don't need counseling. Do you need counseling? No, I'm okay. Are you okay? I'm okay. I mean, my marriage is fine. It's like, no, it's okay to talk to someone.
Right.
And so God recorded a counseling session with Cain for all of history. And he asked him 3 questions. Why are you angry? What are you angry about? Why is your face fallen, which means you're sad or depressed? And then, don't you know if you turn from those 2 things, I'm going to make your life go well? That's actually the counseling session. You've got to turn from these 2 things. And then I'm going to make your life go well. But he says, now, if you don't turn, sin will stand at your doorstep and its desire will be for you, but you must rule over it. I personally think that's addictions. I think that's addictions.
Wow, I'm blown away. That quite possibly is the first and most effective counseling session in the history of mankind.
And it happened in Genesis 4.
Right. Yeah, right. Well, God's always ahead.
But like it's not Timothy and Titus. It's not the books that tell us how to live. It's Genesis 4.
Wow.
And it was after that counseling session that Cain actually killed his brother.
Okay,
so
that's deep.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we think, well, if God talks to me, I would change.
Oh.
If God gave me a dream, I wouldn't do that. Really? Because that's what Cain did.
Right. Whoa.
Because Cain didn't get what he thought he deserved, which was the blessing from God. It's so layered. I know. It is. It's so layered, and and that's why he says in Hebrews, that's why it says it's a root system that you're not looking at.
That is, my mind. I've been getting my mind blown regularly in the sessions of late, and I love that because it means that like the level of teaching and clawing in is getting deeper because
it's good.
Yeah, you're right. It's the digging deeper. It's the looking diligently.
Correct. It says diligently, like diligent. Come on, Tracy, look a little harder than you did for the dollar you found in the couch. Like dig a little deeper
Wow.
because you need to see what's in the root system that's feeding all of your behavior. Like you think this isn't impacting your behavior, and it's impacting everything. Like I could be mad at this person over in the corner, and the rest of my heart's going to stay free. God goes, no, that's actually not how it happens. You're going to have to deal with this. And so when we look at those things that God asked Cain about, he says to Cain, tell me why you're angry. So God's looking at us going, come here, honey. Tell me what you're angry about.
Wow.
Like God wasn't confused in why Cain was angry.
Right.
He knew Cain was confused that he was even angry. Like Cain wouldn't have even said he was angry.
Right. It's getting us to be real with ourselves. And that is the hardest thing, but that is the only thing. That ability to look in the mirror and be real with ourselves. Why are you angry?
And then being real with God.
Right.
Like God's the easiest one to be real with. But most people, when they sin, they run from God. And he's going to Cain, don't run from me, son. I know you're mad. I know you're disappointed. Come talk to me.
Right.
Like, I'm okay with it.
Right.
But we're going to work it out.
Right. Right.
I'm okay with those emotions, but we're going to work them out. And in the end, Cain ignored the greatest counselor, right, ever to see the face of the earth is God. And Cain ignored God and killed his brother.
And the depth of that is insane because it means that a lot of us actually just don't pay attention to God. And we don't want to be real with what we're really upset about or what we're really going through. And isn't that the world that we live in today?
Yeah, it is the world we live in today. The world we live in today, well, it's an interesting system that we're in, meaning, yes, we're in a world that says Facebook, put on the best show you could put on, and then at the same time, the world is feeding you offense, right? Well, you should be offended, Cynthia. You should be offended people don't like women of your color. You should be offended people don't like this. You should be offended they said this. You should be offended, right?
Right.
And so we're actually being taught, and then I think, well, why am I not offended? I need to be more enlightened and be offended.
Right. You know what's really interesting? So, a little while back, recently, right? I spoke at the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington, D.C. And
I love it.
And it was cool. And it wasn't the big main stage. It was one of the main stages around it, right? So I spoke at this dinner the evening before, which was even cooler because I got to speak to a lot of the press, because it was a dinner that is largely about the press and the owners of the networks and the news channels. And it was really interesting because I ended up telling a story about my father, who was the first Black man to ever own banks in America. Now, he did so in the early 60s, he and his business partner. Now, my dad had no formal education. He was out of school by the time he was 14 years old and just hustled, made it. A Jewish man taught him real estate, and so he made his money in real estate. Then he met his business partner, Joe Morris, who was a Black man who was educated from UCLA. My dad was the total opposite, uneducated from Marlin, Texas. Wow. The two of them together bought 7 white banks and savings and loans across the state of Texas in the early 60s, when Blacks still could not drink from the same water fountains, right? Couldn't sit at the front of the bus. Still hardcore segregation going on. My father and Joe had these friends who were these white men who started the First Bank of San Francisco. They would pretend to be the owners of these 7 banks. And what my dad would do is they would disguise themselves as a chauffeur and a janitor to get into their own board meetings. And my father, who was never one to play victim, and that's where this story is going, my father couldn't hire Black people, but he hated that women got discriminated against, so he hired all white women. There were no men who ran the banks. It was all women, because he figured I can give somebody a chance, right? Well, my dad, at the end of my father's life, and he had an incredibly colorful life, up and down and all over the place, but he died really without anything. And I took care of him the last few years of his life. And when I asked him one day, I said, Dad, why are Black people, why are we still so upset about racism and slavery in America? And, my dad looked at me and he said, listen, honey, he said, let me tell you something. He said, bad stuff happens in life. He said, and he said, and for the first 20 minutes that someone does you a harm, grieve and get it out of your system. He said, but after that, you're a darn fool, because you have to take the hand that life gives you and you have to make a choice. And that choice is whether you play it and play it well as best you can or not. And he said, honey, don't ever choose to be a victim. And
It's beautiful.
it is, because I knew it was powerful what he was telling me then in my 20s, because he passed away at 78 years old in the year 2000 when I got my first big job. But every time I think about it today, and I see where we are in the world, and we still have the small things that yes, they're big, but we're still fighting over things that divide us instead of looking for the common dialogue and trying to unite in the areas where we can be strong together. And so it's really interesting to me, because talking about counsel and forgiveness really makes me think about that, because I think forgiveness is the key on every level, and I appreciate this chapter.
I say it this way. Um, your dad, what a beautiful testimony, first off, right?
Right.
I mean, what a beautiful testimony, Cynthia.
Right.
What a beautiful inheritance he gave you.
Right.
Of choosing a different way. I mean, that's a beautiful inheritance.
It really,
that's worth more than gold.
It is.
Right?
It is. I get it.
We forget, but that's worth more than gold, those inheritances. But I say it this way. I say it, we've all been sinned against.
Yeah.
How we respond to that sin in our life actually changes the trajectory of our lives. Like, I want to blame my rapist. I want to blame my sexual abuser for the fact that my life isn't going well, right? I mean, it seems reasonable, and many people would go, oh, yeah, that's horrible. And it is horrible. But ultimately, how I chose to walk that out is what shifted my life more than the original sin against me.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so that's the thing that I think is challenging for people, that my choices, walking out mistreatment of others towards me, changes my life more than the mistreatment.
It does. No, it does. Because honestly, I think when we choose God and we choose not to be the victim, we're basically saying we're allowing God the space to take our mess and make a message. And we all know that a message is way more powerful than a mess,
Right.
And that's what
Right.
that's what God has given you. I for those of you who are joining us this week, Tracey's story is as tough as anybody's. I mean, you could have really stopped when your godly husband chose to get up and get ghost.
Walk out. Right.
Right.
I could have had a few more margaritas.
Right. Right.
I could have just stayed right there in Margaritaville.
Right.
And in the end, I actually have to say, no, that's actually not how I'm going to walk this out.
Right. Right.
Though it feels good in the front end. Like, one of my favorite things in the front end after my husband left was when people said, Tracey, you have a right to be angry. I'm like, you're right. You're
Yes.
right. Until I realized that their declaration over me was more about them and them finding someone who would be angry with them about their lives.
Because misery does love company.
It does. And so I actually had to start drawing back from people who I loved, who were encouraging me to stay angry.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
I wanted freedom. And the challenge is that bitterness or crankiness is actually passed down to your children.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they hear us wax eloquent about the producer, the boss, this person, and how they're horrible to us, how they don't do life. And our children are drinking in our bitterness.
Yeah. And it's poison.
They're being trained
Yeah.
that it's okay to be bitter. How many family members do people not talk to because mom and dad didn't talk to them?
Yeah.
How many aunts and uncles and cousins and grandparents that families don't actually talk to? They don't know why, but mom and dad didn't, so they don't.
Right. So
That's actually bitterness passed down.
completely. So, okay, since we're on family, because that's always a big one, right? How do you deal with family members when you've decided that you're not going to walk in bitterness and offense and that you're going to forgive, but they can't or won't or don't?
Well, I don't have family members like that, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
My family, all 70 of us,
Right.
just walk in sync together. 10 minutes apart from each other, never an argument between us.
The bonded Bickles.
The bonded pickles. Right? So ultimately, we realize relationships are two ways. And I like to liken relationships like bridges. There's lots of different types of bridges, right?
Uh-huh.
There's the swinging bridge over the Guatemalan little rivers, and there's the Golden Gate bridges. The swinging bridges aren't going to handle 2-ton truck, right?
Right.
The Golden Gate bridge will handle 2 tons of, right? A
Right.
2-ton truck.
Right.
And to me, that 2-ton represents correction. It represents how you're not doing something. It represents opinions. It represents, throw whatever in there. That relationships don't have the equity to have those conversations, right?
The equity meaning the input, the
Right.
relationship?
The equity is I put enough in your bank account, Cynthia, to come back and go, Cynthia, you may not want to actually act like this.
Right.
If I haven't put equity into it, you're looking at me going, thanks. Like, who asked you?
Right. Right. It's like the parent. Okay, so to bring it home, I'm sure there were moments where because I had my moments of this, but I'm sure there were moments where your kids maybe looked at dad and said, you don't have the right to tell me that.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Like, I remember specifically one time, my daughter, long story, her husband was over in Afghanistan, pregnant with her, getting ready to have her first baby. They were going to do a Skype call for him to see the birth. And it was 8 years after the divorce. She still wasn't in real relationship with her dad. And her response was, her question to me was, should I invite dad to the birth? And I'm like, why should Isabella, because we knew that's what the little girl said, why should she not get to meet her granddad on the day she's born because you don't like him?
Okay. So now you're talking to all the baby mamas in the world who play chess with children. Because
it's real.
Yeah, it's real.
Hey,
yeah.
It would have been way easier for him and his beautiful, younger, prettier wife not to be with me as my daughter is giving birth. Like, right?
Right, exactly.
No one would have seen it as wrong to go, yeah, let's wait till it's over.
Right.
But I knew that actually Isabella's life was at stake. Like, not at stake, but it actually was going to impact her.
Right. Right.
And I said, her response to me was, Mom, I'm in labor. Can we do this later? That was Jessica's response.
Yeah, right.
Can we just have these conversations? I go, well, you asked me.
Right.
You asked me a simple question. I'm just trying to give you an answer. She's like, yeah. Long story short, she did invite him, and it actually changed their relationship.
Of course it did. Of course it did.
It changed because she released something she didn't know she was carrying.
Right.
And Isabella loves, and reasonably so, her grandpa. Like, right. She loves him. And Mimi, her grandma.
Right.
Her other grandma, right?
Right.
And it was ultimately because she made the hard decision to not let her choices affect the little one's choices.
Man, that's hard.
That's tough.
Yeah.
That's tough. Like, that's tough.
But
that's actually where it gets played out.
I was going to say, that's the rubber meets the road. I'm going to do this as my faith and my beliefs tell me I should, and I know there are better consequences because I'm doing the right thing.
Correct. Like, we like to say act in the opposite spirit, but what does that really mean?
Right.
That actually means when you don't want to, then you need to do it.
Right. Exactly. And I would not have wanted to. Right.
Me neither.
Yeah.
Like, me neither. I'm like, oh, darn, she said yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because then that means I had to deal with a couple that I didn't want to deal with.
Right.
Because it reminded me yet again I was a divorced woman.
Yeah. So
it reminded me yet again that this woman was going to have a place in my grandchildren's lives, and I had to work that out yet again.
Wow.
right?
Right. How not to walk in bitterness. It is. It's constantly working it out every day. And every day, just when I think I've got it, I won't be offended anymore, then another Christian brother or sister comes along and does something, and I just go, only a person who's not thinking would not understand how offensive that is. But people
Right.
actually, they
Don't get
don't.
it.
No, and it's my choice to receive it or not receive it. It's all of our choice to receive it or not
And
receive it.
and so the beauty is, Cynthia, is that you get to look at your history in God,
Right.
and I get to go, okay, He freed my heart on that big one, or even He freed my heart on that little one. I'm going to make it through this big one because I have a history of Him doing it for me. So we have to gain a history in God of that. When I choose to be thankful for the good deal, so like Isabella's being born, I'm choosing to be thankful Isabella has a couple of grandparents,
Right.
as opposed to that woman's in the room.
So it's really a choice.
It's a hard one until you realize it's actually not a hard one and it sets your heart free. And then today it's an easy one for me.
So it's literally looking at all the good rather than focusing on all the negative.
Yes, but you have to deal with the negative.
Right.
Like you have to work it out. See, yeah, right. We
Right.
just want to do that easy thing.
Right.
And he goes, no, he goes, you want to what? He asked Cain, why are you angry?
Right. Why
So then
are
I go,
you angry?
what am I? I'm angry because that man is over me, and I'm talking now. I'm not talking about my ex-husband. I'm talking about in life. I have 5 male bosses, and I'm going, oh, they don't get me. My heart's screaming, and God goes, why are you angry? And I'm like, oh, I'm angry because it feels like some of them might dismiss me, like like my ex dismissed me. Right? So then I
Right.
have to work out how they're bumping into a wound
Mhm.
that may not be fully healed, and that's why I'm angry over here,
Right.
which enables me to release them over here. So yes, I have to look at the positive, but I got to deal with why I'm angry.
Right. And that's I love that. That is the critical point that you make. You got to deal with it. We're not running from Christians tend to run from emotions. Like you said, we get saved and kumbaya, everything is okay. And in reality, everything's not okay. That's the point in which everything gets hard. It's time to overcome. So
Yeah.
I guess as we sort of get down to the end of all of this, you mentioned before about seeking counsel. And
Right.
why don't Christians in general, especially in leadership, seek counsel?
Because it says something's wrong with us.
Right.
It says to the world something's wrong.
Right.
And I'm just agreeing. There is.
Yeah, there is something wrong. Right, exactly.
And that's okay.
And that's
right?
okay.
And that's okay.
Right.
I mean, you're right. I'm agreeing with you. And they're like, wait, I don't know if I like that. And so then we think we're going to lose our jobs, we're going to lose our reputation, we're going to lose. But the deal is God set forth for all eternity a history of a counseling session with him and Cain. That is beautiful. It's a beautiful.
I love that. I love that. I never got that about that dialogue there with Cain. I love that, and I love that your answer to is why don't Christians want to seek counsel? Well, because it's admitting that there's something wrong. Because I think part of the problem is, and I always say that to anyone who watches these sessions or whenever I'm traveling or preaching, I always say, like, I'm a mess. But God said, I choose to use the foolish things of the world to shame the wise and the weak things to shame the strong. Well, in my ability to say, oh, I need counsel about this, I think that's my greatest strength, actually.
Right. Because we believe it's in our weakness he's made strong, or we don't.
Right.
I mean, in the end, Paul said, he didn't say, I was the chief sinner. Paul says, I am the chief among sinners. You're thinking, oh, like, is he being humble? I don't think he was being humble. I think the more he connected with who God was and the light of God's countenance, the more Paul, his heart was revealed, his motives were revealed, and he's thinking, Oh, I'm the chief. Like he wasn't out doing egregious things like he was in the early days, but I mean, I may not be out, sleeping around, doing drugs, doing rock and roll, doing alcohol at 60, 60-year-old grandma, but the movement of my heart can be awful dirty.
Yeah.
And I don't want that dirty. I want to go, God, come, like I'm going to yield to you. I'm going to choose to be thankful. And I'm going to let you into those places that I don't like so much.
Wow. Amen, sister girlfriend. Man,
This is why we're friends.
this is why we're friends. It's true. There's a level of keeping it real that all my
Yeah,
girlfriends have to have, because at the end of the day, I mean, I'm from Hollywood. I did the keep it fake thing.
right,
And
right.
I was never more lonely, more miserable, more
True.
confused, and more unaware of myself.
Yeah, in that darkness,
Hmm.
I mean, the enemy just has a great playing ground. In
Completely.
that silence, I should say, not even darkness, but in that silence of our lives, of that hiddenness, he
Yeah,
goes, I'm going to talk to you, and you're not going to be able to combat it because you're not telling anybody what's happening.
exactly. Exactly.
So I tell on myself.
Yeah, I like to tell on myself. I probably don't have much to admit because I'm sure most of the young people around me, when I tell on myself, they laugh. And they laugh like, yeah, we know. Yeah, yeah, we know. We see you,
We get
Mom.
we get that one.
We get that. Listen, you guys, we are out of time, and I'm just filled up. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you.
I've loved spending time with you.
I have loved doing this. We've actually talked about doing this, and I'm really happy that we finally got to. And now I
Yeah.
realize what a treat. I do believe that Tracey Bickle, who's been joining us the last couple of weeks on the sessions, is and will be for all of you. So, Chaos Beneath the Shade. Tracey, do you have a website or somewhere? There it is, Chaos Beneath the Shade. Do you have a website or
No,
somewhere?
I don't. I don't have a website. I'm sorry.
But if you want to find her
Oh,
teachings or download anything,
you can get on the IHOP KC website.
that's right, ihopkc.org. For now, I'm Cynthia Garrett. We're out of time. You've been a part of another session. I will see you next week.
Mwah.
Hi, everybody. It's me, Cynthia Garrett, and I hope you're enjoying the sessions. And I just wanted to drop in on you and remind you to pick up a copy of my book, Prodigal Daughter, A Journey Home to Identity. I wrote this book because I realized that we are all prodigal kids, and there was a time in my life when I ran off looking for love in all the wrong places and ended up in a world of trouble. But I met my maker and I found my identity in that mess that God turned into a message. So you can go to cynthiagarrett.org and get information about how to get my book online and at booksellers everywhere. I promise it'll bless you.